completely replace animals as a food technology.
Now, meat made from plants.
It's this quest to have it look like the meat that we're used to. This really looks and smells just like a beef burger.
And on the horizon, steak grown in a lab.
With very few cells, we can grow infinite amount of meat.
But will consumers bite?
Vital Signs, today in association with Bangkok Dusit Medical Services. The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. Sunday on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa in association with Dangote.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
I didn't know what his intention was. I knew it could be obstruction of justice.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
Are you playing with fire?
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
It's about right and wrong.
You have to stand up for what you believe in.
We need to realize that our future is at risk and we need to take action.
Was that kind of mortifying or did you enjoy it? You were great.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
Do you regret that? Do you think there should be nuclear power or more commitment to a clean environment?
New Zealand had its experience and changed its laws. To be honest with you, I do not understand the United States.
Does love have a chance?
I always believe that.
And fully understand what's at stake.
Amanpour, today on CNN.
In the village.
Many of the statues ISIS toppled were fakes.
$500 for 2 children. Who sold us like that?
She's got to really be happening.
This shot is
What does that indicate? What's a typical day like? Will there be any sanctions?
Robin, it was a surreal period.
It has been a chaotic, sometimes violent 24 hours at Hong Kong's airport. Pro-democracy protests began there 5 days ago and have escalated to massive disruption. CNN's Ivan Watson has the latest.
Overnight, confrontations in Hong Kong turning violent as thousands of pro-democracy protesters flooded the country's busy international airport, paralyzing it for a second day. As the growing tension played out on live television, police moved in carrying shields and wearing body armor, pushing the crowd back. At times, it was hard to tell who sided with whom. We were there as this group of protesters turned on a man they suspected of being a Chinese agent. Some tried to protect him as others kicked him. Medics eventually succeeded in taking the injured man away. He's since been identified as a reporter for the Chinese state news outlet Global Times. Other protesters blocked passengers from reaching their planes.
I don't have his medical, I don't have water, I don't have here. After today I'm in Yeah, finish, welcome.
Forcing the cancellation of hundreds of flights and stranding thousands of passengers.
We cannot avoid this. It's somehow unavoidable because we fight for our final goal. That is our freedom.
Hong Kong's leader, who's effectively appointed by the Chinese government, admits she's losing control.
Hong Kong society is not safe or stable. The rioters have pushed Hong Kong to the brink of no return.
The protests here began peacefully 2 months ago, as millions of pro-democracy demonstrators took to the streets to oppose a proposed extradition law with mainland China. But some hardliners who don't want this former British colony to be controlled by communist China have grown increasingly violent, clashing week after week with police, at times leading to showdowns with tear gas and nightsticks. The protesters were spoiling for a fight, and now they've got one. Tonight, the central government in mainland China is sending increasingly ominous warnings. showing off security forces close to Hong Kong. What's not clear is if China will use that force to quash the dissent, or if protesters who seem motivated for a fight for their freedom will back down. President Trump tweeted about intelligence reports that China is moving troops to the border, and he appealed for calm. But this is the worst political crisis the city's seen in decades.
I've been joined just now from Hong Kong. What's happening right now? What's the latest?
It's pretty striking. Within hours of practically seeing the protesters get close to lynching that Chinese reporter, the airport here is back up and running. They've covered over the spray-painted graffiti, they've cleaned the leaflets up, and they've put in new measures to try to stop protesters, if they show up again in large numbers, from blocking passengers from trying to fly out of here as they've done for the previous 2 nights. The bigger question, though, is about long-term stability in this city. The government shows no signs of wanting to compromise. Some of the demonstrators are more radical and more desperate and violent than ever. And it just seems like the city is more polarized and divided than I've ever seen it, Anderson.
I've been watching. Be careful. Thank you very much. Here at home, we have an update on a story that's tugged at hearts nationwide. You remember this little girl seen sobbing for her dad after he was stripped away from her in those ice raids last week. Her family was desperate to find him, and now he's been found. We'll tell you where he is. That's next.
It's a metaphor for everyday life. What I would like to do is inspire other people to take on their own Everest.
It's a very unique environment to be in. There's a lot of emotion here right now.
It was such a letdown.
The journey continues.
Judging I've never seen anywhere quite like this. This is otherworldly.
It's a bit scary here, to be honest. Today really was never ending day.
The Challenge Everest, Sunday on CNN.
Excuse me, miss, you dropped this.
It was just a penny.
Just a penny? Just a penny? It all begins with the humble penny. Whether writing your first check or cashing big checks, to those at the top making their mark, closing deals round the clock. On Questman's Business, we know every penny has power. And it's not how many you have, it's what you do with them that counts. That's the marvel of money. Questman's Business. What a profitable hour!
I'm Arwa Damon in Idlib province, Syria, and this is CNN.
Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why. I just want to press you on one further point. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson tonight on CNN.
I'm Christy Lucedale in Hong Kong, and this is CNN.
Well, her name is Magdalena. You may remember her from the heartbreaking video that was shown you that's now gone viral.
My daddy didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal. Government, please play your heart. Let my parents be free with everybody else.
Well, she's 11 years old. She's one of many children stripped of their parents, or their father in this case, after a recent immigration raid. She begged for her dad's release after ICE took him into custody in Mississippi last week. Her family didn't even know where he was. CNN has now learned that he has made contact with his wife. She says he called her and told her he's a little sad but doing okay. He's being held in a correctional facility. He also said he may appear before a judge on Friday or Saturday. News continues. I want to turn things over right now to Don Lemon and CNN Tonight.
This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon, and we've got to talk about what we heard from the President of the United States today. Because let's be clear, this is not politics as usual. This is not normal. This is the President going off the rails during an official taxpayer-funded event, a speech that was supposed to be about energy policy, but quickly turned into a rambling campaign speech, joking about calling off the 2020 election.
Have they ever called off an election before? Just said, look, let's go. Go on, 4 more years. Yeah. And then you want to really drive them crazy, go to hashtag 3rd term, hashtag 4th term. You'll drive them totally crazy.
Joking does not make it okay for a president to say, let's call off the election. There is nothing funny about that. It's also not okay, not normal, for a president to use an official speech to attack his political rivals.
I don't know who's going to win, but we'll have to hit Pocahontas very hard again if she does win. But she's staging a little bit of a comeback. What a group. Pocahontas and Sleepy Joe.
It is not okay for a president to attack his predecessor for, of all things, a book deal.
This thing is costing me a fortune being president. Lawyers, because every day they sue me for something. These are the most litigious people. It's probably costing me from $3 to $5 billion for the privilege of being, and I couldn't care less. I don't care. Nobody looks at Obama getting $60 million for a book. That's okay. Even though nobody in history ever got that much money for a book. Obama got $60 million.
This president cannot get over Barack Obama. He just can't quit him. He sure seems to be steamed about Barack Obama's book deal. And you know why? You know why Barack Obama and Michelle Obama got that big joint book deal? Because that many people wanted to read what they had to say. Millions of people. Maybe it's sour grapes from the man who claims that he wrote The Art of the Deal. In fact, we know he actually had a ghostwriter. And there's no evidence that the presidency is costing him anything like $3 to $5 billion. In fact, we know he is making money from some of his properties, including the Trump International Hotel, which is just 5 minutes away from the White House. And all of that in the president's speech today. None of that is normal. Neither is this, arguing that African Americans should vote for him because, his words, by the way, they have the worst crime rates, the worst education, the worst everything.
Remember, when I was running, I was saying, we're going to do this, we're going to create jobs. Everyone, big yawn, we like it. Let's give them a shot. What do we have to lose, right? I said that with African Americans. They had the worst crime rates, the worst education, the worst everything. They had like 10 things. I'm reading it off a list. I looked, I said, what the hell do you have to lose?
Now the fact is, remember, Facts first here on that show. That argument is not exactly resonating with African American voters. In a new Fox News poll last month, the president had just a 22% approval rating and a 75% disapproval rating with black voters. All this in a speech that was supposed to be about energy policy. But the president did have a few things to say about his least favorite kind of energy, windmills.
And when the wind stops blowing, it doesn't make any difference, does it? I'd like those big windmills that destroy everybody's property values, kill all the birds. Someday the environmentalists are going to tell us what's going on with that. And then all of a sudden it stops. The wind and the televisions go off. And your wives and husbands say, darling, I want to watch Donald Trump on television tonight. But the wind stopped blowing and I can't watch. There's no electricity in the house, darling.
You probably remember that Donald Trump battled Scottish officials over a plan to build a wind farm within sight of his golf resort in Aberdeen. And he has been complaining about wind power ever since.
You'd be doing windmills. In times of war, if you can blow up those windmills, they fall down real quick. You can blow up the windmills, you know, the windmills. Boom, boom, boom. Bing, that's the end of that windmill. If the birds don't kill it first.
The environmentalists, we like windmills. What about the thousands of birds they're killing?
It's like a killing field of birds. If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value.
Try going to the bottom of a windmill someday. It's not a pretty picture.
When the wind doesn't blow, they tend not to do too well. If it doesn't blow, you can forget about television for that night. Darling, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television, darling. And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay?
President, need I say that noise does not cause cancer? The American Cancer Society says so. None of this is normal. The president also made sure he got in some digs today against his former top communications aide, who, not at all coincidentally, is saying the GOP should replace Trump at the top of the ticket.
Anthony didn't support me at the beginning. He was with somebody else, and then he went to somebody else, and he only supported me after it was the foregone conclusion that I was going to win. I'm not a fan of Anthony. I haven't been for a long time. I think Anthony is really somebody that's very much out of control, and he doesn't have what it takes.
Yet he made him his communications director. I'm going to talk to Anthony Scaramucci in just a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. But in the midst of all of this, here's what the president is not doing. He's not doing anything. Not doing anything. Anything substantive about guns. Less than 2 weeks after 31 people were killed in mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton. Well, a source tells us that the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, is talking with lawmakers behind the scenes. And you know how that kind of thing tends to work out. Let me explain to you. Remember the Paris Climate Accord? You remember her reported displeasure with the "send her back" chant? Remember when she tried to get her father to stop his family separation policy at the border? Do you remember how all of that worked out? But I digress. The president claims Republicans support him on strengthening background checks. But there is no evidence of any kind of aggressive arm-twisting campaign by the president to get a specific piece of legislation. But here's what he is doing. Pushing an immigration policy that would make the Statue of Liberty hang her head in shame. There's the poem. You remember it. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. Lift my lamp beside the golden door. I said this president's immigration policy is so cruel, it would make Lady Liberty hang her head in shame. But it seems there is no room for shame in this administration. Just listen to Ken Cuccinelli, the man at the top of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, rewriting that famous poem. The one people around the world think of when they think of America.
Give me your tired and your poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge.
He is literally rewriting what this nation stands for. what it stood for until now, anyway. And attempting to defend himself to Aaron Burnett tonight. Watch.
Well, of course, that poem was referring back to people coming from Europe, where they had class-based societies, where people were considered wretched if they weren't in the right class. And it was introduced, it was written 1 year after the first federal public charge rule was written.
Whatever happened to the land of opportunity? The land that welcomes those huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Welcomes them without asking whether they can pay their way. But there's more from the nation's top immigration official. Ken Cuccinelli is also threatening more ICE raids.
You can expect to see more of that as part of the message of this administration. We're going to enforce the law.
More raids, like the ones last week in Mississippi that led to nearly 700 people being arrested, including the father of 11-year-old Magdalena. She was born here, like her siblings, a child, sobbing, begging for her father to come home.
I need my dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal.
After days with no word, that little girl's father finally had a brief phone call with his family today. But they feared he's going to be deported. His wife told CNN, quote, "He came here to work. It is out of necessity." Yet the president says this.
Our taxpayers pay for people to come into the country and immediately go into welfare and various other things. So I think we're doing it right.
Well, there have been other presidents who saw all of this very differently. Presidents who believed in the American dream, in America's promise to people around the world. Listen to President Ronald Reagan.
I've spoken of a shining city all my political life. In my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here.
Doors open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. Wise words. The president would do well to listen to them. In his new campaign ad, Democratic candidate Julian Castro has a message for President Trump, and he's putting that ad someplace where the president is pretty sure to see it. There he is, Julian Castro. I'm going to talk about that with him next.
Good morning.
I'm going home today.
I don't think we'll be seeing you soon.
We're happy every time you come home. BDMS Healthcare Network. Quality that lives up to international standards. Diverse medical experience, advanced technology, and specialist medical care. The accessible quality hospital network that covers Thailand and the region. BDMS, your trusted healthcare network.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Holmes. This is your CNN News Now. Donald Trump delaying additional tariffs on some Chinese goods until December 15. They include Chinese-made products like iPhones, footwear and televisions. The move coming after trade negotiators agreed to resume talks within the next 2 weeks. Mr. Trump had repeatedly said a 10% tariff increase would hit next month. A US official telling CNN President Donald Trump and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson could sign a joint statement of trade when they meet in France at the G7 later this month. That statement would serve as a roadmap for a potential bilateral trade agreement. Health officials say they are a step closer to curing the deadly Ebola virus. They say 2 new treatments are proving so effective they're being offered to all patients in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The current outbreak there has killed more than 1,800 people since last summer. In Russia, villagers are being told they don't have to leave their homes following a mysterious explosion. Authorities say military drills planned for the area were called off. Last week's blast at a nearby military test site killed 5 scientists. Local authorities say radiation spiked afterwards. That is your CNN News Now. Thanks for watching. I'm Michael.
Go There is a daily news show that takes you from Syria
There's a possible strike.
to Mount Everest
We have just arrived to base camp.
and the streets of Hong Kong, on the Texas border, to the outskirts of Detroit. Go to the center of the story.
Police are at my hotel door.
Streets are closed, lots of security out here. Come with us. Go There, Tuesday through Saturday on Facebook Watch.
The passion of sport, the pressure of competition, the focus it demands.
When you're in that ring for that 90 seconds, everything else just kind of fades away. You're focused on you and your heart.
Follow all of the drama in the Longines Global Champions Tour and Global Champions League as the best show jumpers in the world compete for the top prize. CNN Equestrian Global Champions, Saturday on CNN.
One 2020 Democratic candidate has a novel way of taking President Trump to task for his racist language. And that candidate joins me now. He is Julian Castro. He's a former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama. Secretary Castro, good to see you. Thank you so much. You have this new ad out.
Good to be with you, Don.
Absolutely. You have this new ad out, and in it, you speak directly to President Trump. Watch.
You urged American congresswomen to go back to where they came from. You called immigrants rapists. As we saw in El Paso, Americans were killed because you stoked the fire of racists. Innocent people were shot down because they looked different from you. Because they look like me. They look like my family.
So, Secretary, your campaign purchased local airtime so that what we just saw will play on Fox News tomorrow during Fox and Friends, specifically in Bedminster, New Jersey, where Trump is on vacation. Why are you targeting the ad to the president directly?
He needs to hear it, Don. What I said in that ad was that his words have consequences. We know that he stirred up the passion of people like that shooter that went to El Paso and killed 22 people because he said that he was hunting Hispanics. And this is the kind of America that we're living in right now. So, we want to deliver this message to the president, but just as importantly, we want to remind the American people that it doesn't have to be like this. We can have an America where we can bring the country together, we can stop scapegoating immigrants or anybody else, and recognize that we can be a stronger and more prosperous nation if we do what we've traditionally done in the United States, which is to welcome people from around the world, and to do it in a way that doesn't just allow people who are already well off, wealthy, to come in.
The president has been using racist and racially charged language as a campaign tool. What makes you think that he's going to listen to you and stop doing it?
Well, you know how the president is, Don. First of all, he watches Fox and Friends every morning, so we know that he'll be watching. I think that he listens to those things that you put directly on his radar screen. And I'm challenging him with this ad to recognize that he has to be more responsible as the leader of our country. Do I believe that he's going to do that? I'm not holding my breath. But I do believe that there are a whole bunch of people out there that have had enough. I say at the end of the ad, ya basta, which in Spanish, it basically means enough. I have heard that over and over and over during these last 10 days since the shooting in El Paso. People have had enough of the president's divisive rhetoric, of him stirring up the passions of these racists. And we have an election that's coming up. I believe that we need new leadership. I can offer that leadership that tries to bring our country together instead of tearing it apart.
You heard Ken Cuccinelli, the acting director of Citizenship and Immigration Services. He suggested that the words on the Statue of Liberty should be updated. He said, "Give me your tired and your poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge." What do you think of that, Secretary Castro?
You know, it reads like a headline from The Onion. My grandmother, for instance, came over here in 1922 when she was 7 years old as an orphan because her parents had passed away, had hardly anything. But just 2 generations later, one of her grandsons, my brother, Joaquin, is a member of the United States Congress. The other one, me, served in the president's administration and is running for president of the United States. Whether people came here from Europe or from Asia or Latin America, anywhere, wherever people came from, people have worked hard, started off with nothing, and in this country have made better for themselves and for their family members. That's what built up the great country that we have today. I don't understand what in the world this administration thinks.